And thanks Jenny, and thanks for everyone coming tonight. It feels a bit like Groundhog Day, but I do also feel like we're moving towards something that's the intensity is increasing and the urgency is increasing in a lot of ways as well. But I also want to probably start by acknowledging so much work that's been going on behind the scenes through the various precincts that are involved in this process, also through the Willoughby Progress Associations and the work that's going on there. There's a real marshalling of community groups and community effort in this process to bring focus to things that we all care about. So I just wanted to acknowledge that there's a whole lot of people, many people in the room tonight, as well as our political leaders, but really in terms of grassroots community activity that's going on. So I thought what I might do, first of all, is to give you a bit of an update of what's happened since the last meeting in May. Tim James and Tim James's office reached out to ministers and people that we thought we sought to meet. Initially, the hope was that we'd meet with Rob Stokes. He replied and said, actually, it's not his portfolio. We should talk, or the people should talk to the Minister for Metropolitan Roads, and then she suggested we should talk to the policy person. So that meeting happened, and Tim James, to his credit, attended the meeting and so on. He just had a child a couple of days before as well. So the way I see what's happening here is that there's a juggernaut rolling over us, and there's all sorts of decisions that have been made long ago, and we're having a very difficult time turning that. There's a lot of work going on at the level of Nth Sydney Council, of course, and there has been for some time. We were really not looked after, I'd say, by our previous member. I think the terrible situation that we're facing now is a consequence of state government decisions in which our community wasn't represented. Okay. Thanks, Christy. I just can't quite reach my slides to progress. Thanks, Christy. Yeah, go to the first slide, please. You can go this one forward. That's it. Okay. So I just wanted to say a few words about, really, I've been working on this and thinking about it for a long time. It's also my professional world. I'm an urban designer. I've worked on tunnels in the past. I'm involved in community engagement and consultation professionally. But I guess this has been a real quickening and a real eye-opener as well for me to be sort of outside the tent and in the community side of these processes. And there's a lot of really smart people working on this and thinking about it at the same time. And really, I think what it comes down to is what's the public interest and at what scale does the public interest land? Is the public interest something which is entirely about the state of New South Wales? Is it about the more local community? Is it about special interest groups that might have a stake in decisions? And obviously we have our federal government, state government, local government, and generally the principle that I've noticed seems to work is that power needs to be devolved to the lowest level that it can be under the circumstances. Motorway projects are huge, very complex and very expensive to build. Infrastructure always is, and it's appropriate that it's thought about at a high level. But what's happened here is that there's been a process where the state government has got on and said, okay, we're going to build this tunnel for better or for worse, and there's going to be costs. And the costs are cash money, but they're also loss of land, they're also impacts on communities, they're traffic impacts, there's a whole range of things that go on. And really what's happened in this case is that we're losing green space, we're having major impacts on our traffic function, there's a whole raft of impacts to this Lower North Shore community, but there's no benefit in what's being proposed. It just seems to me that voice that thought about integrating our interests as a community weren't represented in those processes, because otherwise how could we be losing 1.5 hectares of green space, terrible traffic, all these things that are coming out of the project. So that's sort of a nutshell of the issue. But Christy, go forward for me, please. I just wanted to show you There's an excellent history that Dr Ian Hoskins has just written for North Sydney Council. I'm not sure if Dr Hoskins is in the room tonight, but I'd highly recommend that as a read. It's a very short document that just lays it out. And really it's going back to the Cammeray people, obviously, who were the traditional owners of this land and lived here for untold millennia. Captain Cook arrived, but then you can see in 1859, the St Leonard's map showed a reserve for water. Next slide, please, on this land. So you can see reserve for access to water. Long Bay at the top there. Primrose Park is in the bottom of that bay. And then St Leonard's Park actually is the square you can see on the bottom left. Okay. And then this one shows that there was being used as a rifle range. This is in 1875. Okay. In 1899, North Sydney Council collection, a design for a cricket oval on that area and a football field. So there was thinking going on about recreation in this space for a long time. You can see Ernest Street across the bottom. Okay. And then 1943, before the motorway cuts through, and you can see Ernest Street across the bottom. Park Avenue is on the right-hand side of the parkland, and in fact Cammeray Road emerges and cuts around, and in fact that's Albert Street coming up before it was severed by the motorway. Yep. And then after the motorway came through in the 1960s, which took a huge chunk out of the motorway, I should say that the history tells a very interesting story about the contestation in the community about how should it be used. Is it a football field? Is it a golf course? Is it for recreation? People have different interests, and all these debates were going on in the past. And there's Sydney Morning Herald articles and so on. It's all captured in that really nice little history. So this is the plan by North Sydney Council in the 1980s that shows you the lease of the golf club. In fact, the blue area there is the golf club land. The whole thing's Crown land, so it's state land, it's public land, it's part of the public estate. And on that view about the public estate, well, who gets to decide what happens on this land? At that time, the Motorways Department of Main Roads, very powerful agency, and they said, well, we're taking it, we're not going to pay for it because we're going to build a road. Too bad. So that happened. Yes, go on. And then so Cammeray Park, that total area of Cammeray Park is 15.4 hectares. The golf club occupies 2.8 hectares. Most of the land that's been taken is out of the lease that the golf club is using for their links. They have a separate lease for the clubhouse and they have a lease for the links. The golf club course, 12.8 hectares. Land value is about $640 million based on industry advice about square metre replacement value of land. Rent expense at the time in 19 was $24,885, and there was 805 members of the club. So the reason I want to understand this is because there's negotiations happened between the state government and someone over what happened on this land, and it's the golf club that were identified as the tenants, as the affected parties when this decisions were being made. Okay. And then this is North Sydney Council's open space. You can see that the red area are sports grounds. You can see Cammeray Park there in the top, Primrose Park, Tunks Park, Anderson Park, and the golf course represents 31% of North Sydney's total sports grounds. Yep. North Sydney this is population density of all the North Shore councils, top right, so much higher density North Sydney Council. Bottom right is recreation space per person, and North Sydney Council has much less recreation space per person than the other North Shore councils. Yep. And then the motorway proposal came, and this is the diagram that was part of the EIS. We all saw this and we're up in arms and saying you can't take the land. There's been years of submission, and I haven't frankly seen any change in what was contemplated. So that's that diagram. Thanks, Christy. And then this is the area showing the golf course lease. The permanently lost land is the spotted area. Yep. And then there's another 2.7 hectares or so, which has got a fence around it now, which is going to be a construction yard for we don't know how long, and we don't know what's going to happen with the rest of that land after this project's finished. Yep. And then the work's going on now to build a compressed golf course on the remaining part. They're moving the lake down the hill. But all of this has happened, I've got to say, then all those works, the cutting down the trees and everything, without a DA going to council. Council has been the Crown Land Manager, but there's been no consultation over all that work because it was tucked inside the EIS for the tunnel project, even though it's outside the tunnel area. So the trees that we're seeing cut down on the golf course are for the reconfiguration of the golf course for that purpose. There's been no stopping and thinking, is this the right thing to do? It just didn't happen. Yep. And then just some other interesting analogies actually happening right now is at Rozelle. You can see the top is 2007, those big rail yards at Rozelle. So White Bay is off to the right-hand side. And then the bottom, this is West Connect's project with all that wonderful new parkland that's being built for the good people of Lilyfield and Balmain and Rozelle. 10 hectares of new green space along those rail yards. The old industrial land that's been converted to parkland. Great. Yep. Another one that I know about in the 1980s, when 1960s actually, Carl Expressway chopped the domain in half, separated the gallery from the Botanic Gardens. Terrible travesty. Art Gallery in New South Wales. And then when the Eastern Distributor happened, a land bridge was built. There was a negotiation with Carl Scully and Bob Carr, and they said, and the Art Gallery, they said, we can't do this to our city. We've got to connect it back with the land bridge. So that project came along as part of the Eastern Distributor project. Cross City Tunnel followed and also did some work to support it, so to improve the wound that was done in the 1960s by the original motorway. Yep. Cross City Tunnel project, in fact, I worked on this one during these years in the late 1990s for the RTA. When I first saw the project, the portal of the tunnel was spilling traffic onto William Street. Out between the cathedral and the museum, there was traffic spewing onto William Street, and William Street would become a massive traffic artery. At the western end, Sussex Street was severed by the western portal. Over the course of a year, the tunnel migrated along William Street and then it plugged into the King's Cross Tunnel, and that allowed improvements in William Street. It allowed Sussex Street to remain connected, and all the improvements that have followed have been because they made the right decisions in a consideration of options and costs, negotiations, urban outcomes versus traffic transport, and so a reasonable outcome there. Other things happened since then that I don't want to claim. Companies went broke, bad data happened, but there was clearly an effort in both of those projects to mitigate the damage that this motorway project was causing. Okay. And then, of course, you know the tale of woe. I've told it enough about worse traffic and lost intersections, lost connections onto the motorway. I think from where we stand now, there's problems that can't be solved unless there's a radical rethink. I think my position and the position of the committee that I'm involved in aligns with North Sydney Council, which is to say that the project needs to stop now and reconsider these impacts. Okay. Next one. Yep. So back to Cammeray Park. So this is the area that we're concerned about tonight. It's the relationship to Anzac Park. It's the relationship to Green Park. You know, those projects that we looked at, they stitched across the motorway. They build land bridges. They improve the connections. And of course, there is this green link that goes from Primrose Park up through Cammeray Park to St Leonard's Park. It should be connected, but unfortunately, this wound is widening it. You know, the quote about trying to deal with too much traffic by building extra lanes is like dealing with obesity by loosening your belt. Well, you know, we're getting our belt loosened here and we're having a hernia with those great big sheds on it. So that's a problem. Okay. Yeah, so that's the view. I mean, I think I won't go into too much detail about the specifics here because everyone knows, I think. Okay, Christy, that's the arrow there. All right, I think that's the end of my presentation anyway. So, so I just wanted to sort of frame that. I know that, I probably should have said this at the beginning, and I said this to Tim when he walked in, but thank you so much for coming tonight, Tim. We want you to succeed in supporting the outcomes that we're looking for here. Obviously, I think there's... I know that I'm going to ask Zoe Baker to say a few words first, like we discussed, because there's a whole lot of work that's been going through council, and things are moving, over these recent months. We're getting the end of the year's rushing up towards us. We're very worried contracts are going to be signed that'll set things in stone and become very costly to get out of. There's obviously a state election next year as well, so all these things are coming together at once. And this is not, we're not in May anymore, we're in September. So, and there's all these moving parts to understand, but I hope I've put that in a nutshell. Zoe, could you please, oh, pardon me, I'll hand it to Jenny. Okay, good, thanks.